Hi guys, you should have picked up a paper that looks like this. It says AP US History DBQ number 2. No, we are not doing a DBQ. Unless your behavior needs it, we could do a DBQ, but Miss Morgan has told me y'all have been wonderful. So because y'all have been wonderful, we will use these documents as a tool to review what caused U.S. involvement in World War I. But if within the next week or so, if it's deemed that y'all have not been model citizens, we could do this DBQ. So you're going to have it like this, but I'm actually going to pull it up on a screen. I've focused it in a little bit better because last time I had issues with having to record. So we aren't writing a DBQ, but I'm using the documents as a way to discuss World War I and perfect AP skills. Also, we are not writing a DBQ again unless your behavior is unruly that we need to write a DBQ. So in our packet, there's two different sets in here. This is a packet. Do you see how these boxes are like kind of curved boxes? This is the first packet, and if you go a little bit in, there's a second packet, and they're kind of like boxy. Because I'm not going to go in the order that they are presented. I'm going to jump around in the packet because we're going to look at what caused it. So this couple of pages in, there's another DBQ. I have two options if we need to write a DBQ. But I'm going to refer to the square boxes, and I'm going to refer to them as the curvy boxes. So what we're going to look at, last year in world history, y'all talked about what caused World War I in Europe. And y'all probably remembered a phrase called mania, one militarism, which we saw as Europe was becoming imperialistic. They went into Africa. There was this huge war between the European nations that were carving up Africa, and they basically had the preliminary round in for World War I, where they used all their weapons in the war in Africa for domination. Alliances, we saw this form when they were carving up Africa too, that groups of people started to ally with each other, and they said if someone attacks you, it will be an attack on all, and we will come to your rescue. We saw the birth of nations. The nations started to form on cultural, religious basis, ethnic basis, and having extreme pride in one's country. We also saw imperialism in reference back to Africa. And then the real spark that set World War I into motion, the catalyst, was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. What we're looking at here is what caused the war in Europe. These will not be the causes of why the U.S. gets involved. So what we're going to look at is documents of why the U.S. didn't get involved in the first place, and then what historical events caused and urged the Americans to get involved in World War I. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the square documents. The square documents are a couple of pages in, and we're going to go to document A. And so this is document A. I just blew it up on my screen. So I'm going to read this. This is President Woodrow Wilson, August 19th, 1914, and his message to the U.S. Senate. Okay, so we're going to look at what this document's saying, and we'll look at the historical situation, intended audience, point of view, and purpose. So looking at it here, we could kind of say the intended audience is the Senate, right? He is talking to them, but in all reality, he's probably talking to the American people as well. So I'm going to read this, and we're going to go through it, and we're going to determine how do we get involved in this war. So it says, my fellow countrymen, I suppose that every thoughtful man in America has asked himself during these last troubled weeks what influence the European war may exert upon the United States. And I take the liberty of addressing a few words to you in order to point out that it is entirely within our own choice what its effect upon us will be, and to urge you very earnestly upon you the sort of speech and conduct which would best safeguard the nation against distress and disaster. So looking at this first thing, he wants to talk to the people, right? He says, we need to be careful of our speech. Can we reflect on a war that the speech got galvanized to get us involved? It should be ringing in your head, the Spanish-American War with the yellow journalist. So he's realizing, and we could put this as a historical situation, right? That the Spanish-American War, people got riled up by the jingoism that was given by our yellow press. And so looking at that speech, his intended audience could be the newspapers. So we got some historical situation, we got some intended audience. Let's look at the next paragraph. The effect of the war upon the United States will depend on what the American citizens say and do. Every man who really loves America will act and speak in the true spirit of neutrality, which is the spirit of impartiality and fairness and friendliness to all concerned. The spirit of this nation in this critical matter will be determined largely what individuals and society and those who gather in public meetings do and say, upon what newspapers and magazines contain, upon what ministers utter at their pulpits, and men proclaim as their opinions on the street. So Woodrow Wilson is really concerned about people's speech. And he's saying we need to watch what we say because the United States should be neutral. So at the start of World War I, the U.S. policy to what broke out in Europe was neutrality. And I want you to remember that. I just put this as our neutrality document. Because this document and most documents, if we ever to see this on World War I, it's always going to ask us what caused America to shift into getting involved into World War I. And it's neutrality. And we could correlate World War I and World War II in the same manner. We all start off as neutral. So we know he's trying to, historical situation, he's thinking about the Spanish-American War. His intended audience is the American public about what we're going to say. His point of view is neutral. And his purpose is to keep us out of the war. So we're going to go to the square document right underneath that. Document B, sorry, mine's kind of crooked, but you have it in front of you. And this is looking at a bar graph that's telling us about our exports from 1910 to 1915. So the war breaks out in 1914. So I want us to look at that. In 1910, do you see the UK is the first line? Do y'all see on this bar graph? UK, I know it's not in color for you. Mine's not in color either. It's UK and then it's France and then it's Germany's the third line and then Austria-Hungary. Okay, and then it goes to the next one. So we're still trading with UK. We're still trading with France. We're still trading with Germany. We're still trading with Austria, right? So as we go all the way up to 1914, we're still trading pretty evenly with the UK, France, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. If we were to put it in our own words, all the way up until 1914, we're trading pretty evenly with the British, the French, the Germans, and the Austrians. But look at 1915. All of a sudden, we see that Germany and Austria-Hungary are missing. So when we look at World War I, we know we're going to get on the side of the Allies because when we export stuff to them, at this moment, they do not have enough money to pay us back. So we really want them to see them win the war so that we could get our money back. So this document is an economic document. We have economic ties to the Allies. And in every single war, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, we will get involved in the war because a lot of American businessmen have made loans to these countries that if those countries don't win, America businessmen will not get paid back. And so we know that we'll side with the Allies based off this document because of the loans, okay? So that is our summation of this document, but what I want to look at is what historical situation led to us just trading with the UK and France. So here's a map. And so when I look at this map, we know that we are trading with the United Kingdom and France right here, these two. Do y'all see that? I probably can't see my mouse. We're trading with the United Kingdom and France. But what is going to happen right here between the United Kingdom and France is that the British are going to put up a blockade. Do y'all see all those boats? We're going to see unrestricted submarine warfare go on. So can the U.S. really get to Germany with the blockade that's going on here? So if the blockade is going on, this is another historical situation that I could relate to right here of why Germany and Austria-Hungary are not able to get any aid, because what is going on in the North Sea? What is going on in the Atlantic Ocean? The unrestricted submarine warfare is preventing the United States from trading with the Germans. Also, the blockade that the British are putting up is preventing free trade with the Germans and the Austrians. So that's a historical situation. Really, from a map, a map and a chart, I can't tell the intended audience. I can't tell the point of view of the document, and I can't tell its purpose. It's giving us just about exports, right? What are we sending? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the bubble documents, and the bubble documents are the first document sets. Okay, it's this one in the front. We're going to go to document G. The source, it says an advertisement in the New York Times, May 1st, 1915. So I'm taking these chronologically. We just talked about Wilson saying that we're staying out of the war. We just looked at a document that is pulling us into the war because of economic ties. But now we're in a newspaper. It says, notice, travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that there's a state of war that exists between Germany and her allies and Great Britain and her allies, and that the zone of war included in the waters are adjacent to the British Isles. So that's what I pointed out right here before this. Remember, I talked about the war being over here by the British Isles. There's unrestricted submarine warfare over here in this area. There's the blockade going on. So Germany is warning us, look, their zone of the war includes the waters adjacent to the British Isles. That in accordance with the formal notice given by the Imperial German government, vessels flying the flag of Great Britain or any of her allies are liable to destruction in those water, and the travelers sailing in the war zone on ships of Great Britain or her allies do so at their own risk. So if we're to have a summation of this document, putting it in our own words, Germany has taken out an advertisement in the New York Times and they're warning travelers. It seems kind of weird that they would take it on an advertisement, but if we know the historical situation about war, which we've talked all the way back from the War of 1812, that if someone's going to attack another boat, they have to give notice. I want you to think now the Germans have a new type of vessel called a submarine, right? And if they were to give warning, they would have to have the submarine come up the water, right? They would have the little guy get out of their porthole, like Luigi and Mario it out, get onto the boat it's going to attack, say, hey, we're going to attack you, and then come back in and go down the porthole, go back down under the water, and then attack. So the Germans, instead of having to do that process of what we know of international warfare, the Germans are taking out a newspaper article saying, hey, we're warning. And they do this all across the world. They take out advertisements in newspapers to tell people they're going to be attacked. Because of their new technological development, they want to also adhere to the international rules and also be able to use their technology for its intended purpose. So we know what this document is saying. Now we know the historical situation about having to give warning because of the international law, and we know that they're using the submarine. Their intended audience is anybody that is going to be on a boat in this area. Purpose, because they're at war. They want to wage war, and they're going to wage war on cargo because they're fearing that a lot of the cargo, a lot of passenger ships are carrying military cargo. And its point of view, it's adhering to international law. So this is our next reason. It's called unrestricted submarine warfare. The Germans want to wage unrestricted because they want to make sure they give that warning, but they could bring their vessel out without having to give up its secrecy. So this is 1915, May 1st. Let's look at the next document. This is the square documents, and this one's in May 13th. So this is if we look at this, 12 days later, they've given that warning. And now we're in the square document, document C. This is Secretary of State Lansing of the United States. He's sending a letter to the ambassador of Germany. It says, in the view of recent acts of the German authorities in violation of the American rights in the high seas, which culminated in the torpedoing and sinking of the British steamship Lusitania on May 7, 1915, by which over 100 American citizens lost their lives. It is clearly wise and desirable that the government of the United States and the Imperial German government should come to a clear and full understanding as to the grave situation that has resulted. So I kind of relate these documents together, right? Germany has given a warning now. Germany was trying to adhere to the laws, and now they know they've attacked this ship. So if we're summarizing this, they've attacked a British mail steamer. It had American citizens on it. And so now let's look at the historical situation. What do we know about boats in history? If we look back at the Spanish-American War, boats draw Americans into this war. And so this is why Secretary of State Lansing is saying, whoa, this is a grave situation. They've attacked our boat. Remember with the Spanish-American War, they were like, remember the Maine to hell with Spain? He's very fearful that the American people could be drawn into war. So that's the historical situation. We know the intended audience is the ambassador of Germany, but also the ambassador of Germany is going to talk to Kaiser Wilhelm. He's going to talk to the German authorities saying, whoa, maybe we need to draw back. So Secretary of State Lansing is trying to get not only the ambassador's attention, but the German government's attention. The point of view is we could see that Lansing does not want to get involved in this war. He's like, this is grave, right? This is bad. And his purpose is to make some diplomatic correspondence with this nation. We're going to go to the next document. And this is basically the Lusitania. Y'all learned about this last year. But the Lusitania does have a dramatic impact on America. Our next document we're going to go to is the first page. That's a bubble document, document A. And the source is the United States. This is the 64th Congress, the first session, has the House document. And this is Wilson's remarks made before Congress concerning the German attack on an unarmed Channel steamer, the Sussex, March 24th, 1916. So this is almost a whole year later. I have deemed it my duty, therefore, to say to the Imperial German government that if it is still its purpose to persecute relentless and indiscriminate warfare against vessels of commerce by the use of submarines, notwithstanding the now demonstrated impossibility of conducting the warfare in accordance with what the government of the United States must consider the sacred and indisputable rules of international law and universally recognized dictates of humanity. Okay, that was a lot. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. So we know the German government used a submarine, attacked the Sussex, right? And he's bringing up this whole line, the sacred and indisputable rules of international law. We know that to mean that the Germans were supposed to give what? A warning, exactly. Okay, and this is a really long sentence, so I had to stop there. Okay, so he says they need to follow these rules. The government of the United States is a last effort to the conclusion that there is but one course it can pursue, that unless the Imperial German government should now immediately declare and effect an abandonment of its present methods of warfare against passenger and freight-carrying vessels, this government can have no choice but to sever diplomatic relations with the government of the German Empire altogether. So basically this is a warning, right? If they don't stop attacking those ships, the U.S. has no choice but to stop relations with them. So we kind of summarize this, right? Do I have some historical situation here? I could bring up the Lusitania. I could bring up the Maine from the Spanish-American War. We know that his intended audience is the House, right? He's doing this in front of the House, but also he's he's kind of getting to the German people, right? And a lot of people in the United States are listening to this. His point of view, he wants to be neutral. He wants to stay out of this war. We know that from the first document that we saw. And his purpose is to keep us out of this war. Point of view is neutrality. Let's look, and this is going to be labeled the Sussex document. Okay, we're going to go to square document E. That one's the one in the back. It looks like this. And this is a note from the German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann to Germany. Okay. It says, on the 1st of February, we intend to begin submarine warfare unrestricted. That should bring to mind that they're not giving warning. In spite of this, it is our intention to keep neutral the United States of America. If this attempt is not successful, we propose an alliance on the following basis with Mexico: that we should make war together and together make peace, that we should give general financial support, and it is understood that Mexico is to conquer the lost territory of New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. The details are left for your settlement. You are instructed to inform the President of Mexico of the above as soon as it is certain there will be an outbreak of war with the United States. Please call to the attention of the President of Mexico that the employment of ruthless submarine warfare now promises to compel England to make peace in a few months. So I'm looking at this document. I know this is a note from the German Foreign Secretary to the German ambassador in Mexico. And I know I cut off the document right there, but this is to the German ambassador to Mexico. So I know that's his intended audience, but also I know that he's trying to talk to the Mexican president. Right? This is a note that is sent via the wires, cable wires, and it's sent through the Atlantic. This note is actually intercepted by the British. The British get a hold of this. They find out that Germany is trying to induce Mexico to keep the United States out. And so the historical situation is going to happen here is the British are going to bring this to the United States government. And they have a selfish reason. When the British bring it to the U.S. government, so we know now, here's a new intended audience, right? This is for the U.S. government. Remember I say a lot of times intended audience is not in the document. What they're looking for is the stuff outside of it. So the British bring this to the United States. And their whole purpose is to make the United States go to war on their side. And there's stuff that's going to rile up the Americans, that we're going to lose the Mexican cession. They're promising Mexico to gain everything back from the Mexican cession. And so we know the intended audience is the United States. We know the British are going to intercept this. The purpose of the British is to make the U.S. be on the side of the Allies and against Germany. And its point of view, we know that this was pro-German. But when it's in the hands of the British, it's pro-British to make the Americans go to war. So this is the telegram. The next one I'm going to show you is on the second page of the bubble documents. And it's an image. It's not bubbled, but there's a couple of things that we have to talk about political cartoons at this time. It should say, I know it says square document A, but that's a mistap on mine. It's square document D. Right? It's on the second page. Any time in history that you see a guy with the plume that sticks up like that, he's going to be a German. Anytime that you see a guy in a poncho with a sombrero, we're going to be stereotypical Mexican here. So this is called, the political cartoon is Some Promise. So there's a German dude whispering very into the ear of a Mexican person. It says, join with Germany and you will get a bit of the United States. So this should evoke from what we read in the last document, the telegram, the Zimmermann telegram. Okay, we're going to go to the front page. And this is the Norfolk Journal. It says, not the least benefits that the race will derive from the war will come as a result of having white officers in Negro regiments, most of whom will come from the South. Okay, so we're looking at, they're talking about the military, right? We're involved in this war, and we're looking at white African-American relations. This will occur as a blessing in disguise. So we're going to have a benefit of white officers over African American regiments. And this is one of the things in this war, it's really hard for African Americans to move into positions of authority. It is practically certain that no Southern white man can go to the front with a Negro regiment and come back without a changed viewpoint on all questions affecting race. So an officer who is taking an African American regiment is going to come back changed. Every such officer that returns and takes up his residency in the South may be counted upon as being safe friend of the Negro after the war. So these officers are going to trust the African American. So the Norfolk Journal is actually an African American journal, and it's talking about how that if African Americans go into the war, and yes, they're being put in units where whites are in charge, but it's taking the positive spin, saying this is going to be beneficial because it's going to improve relations in the long run when we come back. So this is very idealistic. It says making the world safe for democracy has reference to doing away with Kaisers, czars, and princesses, to the dissolution of Kaiser Wilhelm and his world empire dream. But in attaining the fundamental desires, the byproducts of this conflict will go a long way towards lifting the burden and social and economic oppression under which the Negro labors. So this is another idealistic thing. Wilson will make several claims in history that he's going into this war to make the world safe for democracy. We're going to take down these autocratic governments. So this document, one of the reasons why the U.S. gets involved in the war is idealism, that everybody's going to benefit by spreading democracy. We're going to go to the square documents, document F. And this is Woodrow Wilson. He's speaking in front of the Senate. He says, neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved and the freedom of its peoples. And the menace to that peace and freedom lies in the existence of autocratic governments backed by organized force which is controlled wholly by their will and not by the will of the people. We have seen the last of neutrality in these circumstances. The world must be made safe for democracy. Its peace must be planted upon the tested foundations of liberty. We have no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We seek no indemnities for ourselves, no material compensation for the sacrifice we shall freely make. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind. We shall be satisfied when those have been made as secure as the faith and the freedom of its nations can make them. Okay, Wilson has definitely changed his tone. He's saying we can no longer be neutral. Can we think of events that has caused the U.S. neutrality to change? You're probably thinking of the unrestricted submarine warfare, the Sussex, the Lusitania. Hey, that all happened. He had been touting neutrality. But he kind of has some overtones that us going into this war is going to be great, right? He makes some very idealistic arguments. The world must be safe for democracy. We must have liberty. So Wilson is in front of Congress being very idealistic. And again, he's in front of the Senate, not Congress, because Senate has the right to declare war. Okay? So he's in front of the Senate, and we're going to have some commentary about that. So we're going to go to the bubble document F. And this is Senator George Norris, opposition to Wilson's declaration for war. Okay? There are a great many American citizens who feel that we owe it as a duty to humanity to take part in this war. Many instances of cruelty and inhumanity can be found on both sides. So this guy is saying that many people are saying we should go in this war. But Norris is bringing up, well, both sides have done bad things. Men are often biased in their judgment on account of their sympathy and their interest. To my mind, what we ought to have maintained from the beginning was the strictest neutrality. If we have done this, I do not believe we have been on the verge of the war at the present time. I have no quarrel to find with a man who does not desire our country to remain neutral. I think such people err in judgment and to a great extent have been misled as to the real history and the true facts by almost unanimous demand for the great combination of wealth that has directed the financial interest in our participation of war. I want you to look at this last sentence. The combination of wealth that has directed our financial interest. Okay? Again, who has America been lending money to, sending munitions to, that if they lose the war, they won't get their money back? The Allies, correct. We saw that on that first document that we stopped trading with Germany and Austria-Hungary. Now he's saying, look where the money's going. It is that money that is driving us into this war. And I promise you, we'll see this in World War I, World War II, Vietnam. That people who invest in war, they want to make sure their side wins that they've loaned to make sure they get their money back. We have loaned many hundreds of millions of dollars to the Allies in this controversy. While such an action was legal and countenanced by international law, there is no doubt in my mind but the enormous amount of money loaned to the Allies in this country has been instrumental in bringing about the public sentiment in favor of our country taking a course that would make every bond worth 100 cents on the dollar and making payment for every debt certain and sure. So he's saying people are going to profit off this money, right? That their bonds in those companies would make a lot of money, and they want to make their debt paid back through this instrumentally, and also through this instrumentally of others who have not only made millions out of the war in the manufacturing of munitions, etc., and who would expect to make millions more if our country can be drawn into the catastrophe. A large number of the great newspapers and news agencies of the country have been controlled and enlisted in the greatest propaganda that the world has ever known to manufacture for sentiment in favor of war. So Mr. Norris is saying, we got to be careful. We know we're getting in this war for economic reasons, right? So some very rich 1%, the 400 families that are rich, can get their money paid. People who have invested in the stock market, what really is the expense? We're going to look at one more document. This is square document, document G. And this is a guy named Robert Lafayette. We've seen him as a governor of Wisconsin. And he's making an address to the Senate. He's a senator. And again, we know the Senate's talking about this because Wilson's gone to them. Wilson says, let's go to war, right? Neutrality is no longer feasible. And so these guys are making arguments in front of the Senate to really decide if we should go to war because they have the full authority. So let's read what he said. It says, the failure to treat the belligerent nations of Europe alike, the failure, okay, so have we treated them alike? We've kind of favored one side, right? We favored the Allies. The failure to reject the unlawful war zones of both Germany and Great Britain. Germany, they warned us, right? They said, don't go there. But Great Britain, haven't they? I know Germany had the submarines, but Great Britain had the blockade. Both of those people is wholly unaccountable for our present dilemma. We should not seek to hide our blunder behind the smoke of battle, to inflame the minds of our people by half-truths into the frenzy of war in order that they may never appreciate the real cause until it's too late. I do not believe that it is our national honor that is served by such a course. The right way is the honorable way. One alternative is to admit at our initial blunder to enforce our rights against Great Britain, as we've enforced our rights against Germany. Demand that both those nations shall respect our neutrality rights upon the high seas to the letter, and to give notice that we will enforce those rights from this time forth against any belligerents that live up to that notice. The other alternative is to withdraw our commerce from both. The mere suggestion that food supplies would be withdrawn from both sides impartially will compel the belligerents to observe the principles of freedom of the seas for neutral commerce. So this is Robert Lafayette. his historical situation. He's talking about unrestricted submarine warfare. He's talking about Lusitania. He's talking about the Sussex, right? His intended audience is the Senate, and it is the American public, right? We're getting drawn into this war. His purpose is to keep us out of this war, and his point of view is we need to keep both sides. We need to be fair. We've been favoring one side, right? The Allies, and we've been really harsh on the Germans. So our reasons is not mania for getting involved. This is economic, right? So the reasons for U.S. involvement, I have a little acronym. First one is Lusitania. Then unrestricted submarine warfare, that they're using the submarines without warning. The Sussex, right? Telegram, lust, okay? That's how I remember those. And then the next one is ICE, idealism. Cultural ties, basically democracy. Because one of the key things we kept on saying, Germany and her allies are autocratic. Well, cultural ties, democracy, is what ties us to the allies. And economic ties. So mania is the reason why the war starts off in Europe. The reason why the U.S. gets involved is lust, ICE. Okay, so I know there's another document you should be getting to. It looks like this. Reasons for the U.S. involvement in World War I. We went through documents to kind of go over this. We talked about cultural ties with the Allies. We've had a lot of our political heritage come from them. Loans and trade, I tied this to economics. Idealism, right? Democracy versus autocratic governments. We also wanted to make the world safe for democracy. Wilson also says if we get involved in this war, this is going to be a war to end all wars. Gosh, Wilson, he didn't think about how World War I is going to set up World War II. Freedom of the seas weren't really free, right? The British were having that blockade that stopped our ships from getting to Germany, so we couldn't trade with them. Germany kept on violating the international warfare laws in the sea, right? They kept on sinking ships, unrestricted submarine warfare. We've seen two of them, Lusitania and Sussex. The U.S. was trying to hold Germany accountable through the Sussex Pledge, not the British. And then we see the Zimmerman note, which I called the telegram. So the immediate reasons for getting involved in the war. Germany, after the telegram, says they're going to go back to unrestricted submarine warfare. After that telegram is intercepted by the British, brought to America, the U.S. will break diplomatic relations. There's a Zimmerman note, all that stuff happening right there. Russia is going to have the Bolshevik Revolution, and they're going to withdraw. And what happens is this puts fear on the Americans. Let me go. Sorry, that's my email. I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to go to this map. When Russia pulls out of this war, people start to freak out because now the Eastern Front is gone and Germany can now put all of its troops over here. So we feel that there's this threat that, oh my gosh, Germany, now that Russia's gone, Germany can surely win this war. The Allies need our support. We're going to see 4 unarmed U.S. ships are sunk by unrestricted submarine warfare. And all of this stuff that is going on with the ships is really what draws us into the war. I promise you, every single war is going to be started by ships. The War of 1812, remember, impressment. Spanish-American War, the Maine. World War I, Lusitania, unrestricted submarine warfare, Sussex. World War II, Pearl Harbor. Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin incident with the USS Maddox. Okay, guys, we got through the documents. Hopefully you understand what the reasons are the U.S. got involved. I think we're going to have, if I look back at my calendar, today, I know we already finished TR to Wilson. We did imperialism notes last time. We just did the causes of World War I notes in the documents. Now y'all have time, because we finished kind of early, to go back and get a book, get the white book, and do some of this work right here for homework. Okay? See y'all soon.